Hi guys. In this video I want to share a little bit about my concerns pertaining to the UK government and a little bit of the tyrannical behavior that I've witnessed over the last few weeks, especially in the area of the violation of the rule of law and the violation of property rights that I guess a lot of people may not be familiar with. Now, as many of you know, I've come across to the UK. I'm setting up my business. I'm operating as a trader and a property investor. And when I came across, of course, one of the first people I consulted was an accountant on the best way to set up my companies, set up my activities. How do I pay myself and deal with all the surrounding tax issues. And I had a wonderful conversation with my accountant, and basically I learned the truth about the HMRC, which is Her Majesty's Revenues and Customs Division, which is basically the IRS of the UK for those in America, the Board of Inland Revenue for those in Trinidad and Tobago. It is the tax, the division that's responsible for collecting tax, duties, customs, levies, and these sorts of things on behalf of Her Majesty's government. And I was shocked, absolutely shocked, to find out that the HMRC has overwhelming power to violate property rights and the rule of law when it comes to the collection of taxes. I mean, I can't even tell you the horror stories that my accountant came back and told me about people who've put provisions in place legally, put systems in place, corporations, trust, and other things that on discretion of the HMRC have completely busted open and completely ignored a lot of the legal and structural implementation that some people have put into place. So for myself, there have been a lot of changes regarding the properties in the buy-to-let market in the UK. I have a couple of buy-to-let properties, and I was literally blown away by these changes and the number of hoops that people are now being forced to go through to deal with this thing. And for anybody who has been following my work, I said, look, in order for there to be any type of prosperous, peaceful kind of civilization, society, you don't need very much. You need, free markets, you need the rule of law and strong property rights. And it is the decay of these things, many times by governments, such as in Venezuela and Zimbabwe and elsewhere, that causes, countries to go into financial turmoil and collapse. And of course, I mean, there are other things as well. They could borrow too much money and all this other sorts of things. But generally speaking, as long as you have some free markets, some strong property rights, the rule of law, and people are free to choose their enterprises, and the state intervention is kept to a minimum, you will have tremendous prosperity, as we've seen nations out in Singapore, Hong Kong, and all throughout Asia, even in Botswana, in Africa, Chile, in South America. All of these countries that have adopted these free market principles have seen tremendous prosperity come to their people. And a lot of this was inspired by the Scottish economist Adam Smith. So I'm absolutely flabbergasted that the country that basically started the train on economic growth has so far fallen from the ideas that were championed in the British Empire. Now, to explain what I'm talking about, very simply, there have been a couple of articles that have come out that will just basically highlight what this is. And, to make the record very clear, I am totally for legal tax avoidance. I think, as I've stated in other videos, I believe taxation is a form of extortion. As the libertarians would say, it is a form of theft. I'm not saying we shouldn't pay our taxes, but I think each of us has a moral obligation to limit that theft legally to the best of our ability. I don't think we should have to pay any more in taxes than is absolutely necessary. And therefore, I'm very much in favor of things like trusts and corporations and different avenues to legally avoid paying unnecessary taxes. But this is what brings me to these articles concerning the HMRC. Now, the first article that I'm going to look at is this one. So really quickly, I'm just going to touch on this article. It's from a couple years ago, but it kind of starts to illustrate a little bit about what I'm referring to. So IT consultant handed a £100,000 tax bill, accuses the HMRC of violating his human rights. An IT consultant faces a £100,000 backdated tax bill, has accused the HMRC of violating his human rights in a unique test case. Robert Hewson was one of a scores of people who followed specialized tax advice to set up Isle of Man Trust to avoid British income tax. The scheme was entirely legal. This is the most important point, right? This is not evasion. This is not tax evasion, which is the illegal unpaying of taxes. This is tax avoidance, which is totally legal. We should all strive to pay as little tax and be robbed as little as possible. So the scheme was entirely legal and ran for 7 years until Parliament closed the loophole retrospectively in 2008 Financial Act and issued a backdated demand for millions of pounds. The top barrister, David Elvin, QC, today told London's appeal court that Mr. Hewson was ordered to pay up more than £100,000, while many others were hit with demands they could not meet, even if they sold their entire assets, including their family homes. The retrospective change in the law had left a legacy of financial worry, mental health problems, and marital breakdown, said the barrister. Now, on Mr. Hewson's behalf, Mr. Elvin is bidding to persuade Lord Justice Mummery, Lord Justice Morgan, and Sir Paul Kennedy that the government's move to violate the fundamental human rights of Mr. Hewson and others to free enjoyment of their private property. So again, this is just a move by the HMRC. They've changed the laws, something that was legal, they made it illegal, and but what they did is they backdated it, and they basically wiped out all of the protections that this Isle of Man Trust was able to endure. Now again, I think further down it actually makes the point that Mr. Hewson didn't have a problem. Where is it? He was willing to pay the money, but the fact that it was retroactive, meaning that Parliament could just suddenly backdate this encroachment upon his tax savings and his money and stuff like that, that was an overreach, and it's been unprecedented. Anybody wants to read the full article, I will put links in the description below. But again, this is a violation of human rights. It's a violation of property rights. Your earnings are your property. And unlike what the Parliament and others seem to assume, it is not their money. Although yes, it's their job to collect money to fund the government, it is not their money. It is our money, and we have an obligation to protect our money from the onslaught of the state. And the state, just disregarding and changing the rules on these types of things are detrimental, especially if they retrodate it. And I mean, I don't know what the outcome of some of the other people who have used these instruments. Maybe some of them have gone out of business. And these types of things are destructive. This is the destruction of wealth, destruction of property. And it doesn't seem, at least, I mean, this case is ongoing. I'll have to follow up with it. It doesn't seem like HMRC has very much remorse in doing this. I don't know if this has been overturned or not. But this is clearly a problem of the overreach of their ability to basically violate the rule of law. And they don't seem to have a problem destroying people's property rights to collect these taxes. And this is a very troubling trend. So let's go on to the other article that I wanted to look at. It's very similar. It's very disturbing. And it has to do with private property and corporations and how corporations are set up. So in this article, this is more recent, I believe it's February of this year, 2018, over 100 BBC stars face paying back thousands in tax as HMRC wins claim against presenter. Now, the story for this is, more than 100 BBC presenters are facing a tax bill that could run into hundreds of thousands of pounds after a former star lost her case against the HMRC. Krista Ackroyd earned more than the Prime Minister, also co-host of the regional Look North program on BBC One. She was paid as a freelancer through her personal service corporation company at the BBC's request. But HMRC ruled that she would have been paid the same level of tax as a BBC employee, so hence Ms. Ackroyd must now pay back the £419,151 that basically was afforded her savings by the corporation. Now, let me kind of explain what's going on here. Many actors, presenters, and so forth, especially in the film business, they're independent agents. So there's like a Warner Brothers or like a big production company like Universal or whatever, and they hire an actor, whether it's a Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt or whatever. But the Brad Pitt is not, you don't get Brad Pitt. You deal with Brad Pitt Incorporated. He has a company, he is a brand. And what a lot of people don't know is that corporations are taxed differently than individuals. And I mean, the biggest difference between a corporation and a personal tax is that as a personal tax on your personal income, you are taxed before you earn any money. At least in the West, you are taxed as your paycheck comes, the government takes their money immediately. Corporations are different. Corporations are taxed on profits, if there are any, after the duration of their business year, which means they're allowed to spend all the money they want before the end of the year, and if there is profits, they're taxed on the profits. So they're taxed differently. And of course, corporations get deductions. There are, business expenses and other things that come out of that that could reduce the overall profit, hence they pay less in taxes. It is a perfectly legal way to set up a business. I have a corporation. It protects me not only from, overreach of the taxation, but if anybody were to sue me or for my services, the corporation protects my personal assets from the company assets, so that I'm not a liability or infinite liability and stuff like that. So a corporation is designed to protect individuals and stuff like that, and stakeholders, as well as the fact that it is taxed differently and do offer tremendous advantages tax-wise. But the HMRC just completely disregarded this. They looked at the legal setup of Christina Ackroyd, and now they're going to impose this on all the other presenters, and basically said, well, the whole reason that you have this tax setup, it's really not an operating business. It's really not any different than if you were an employee for the BBC. So we're just going to completely ignore all of the legal structure of your corporation and treat you and your company as a employee. And again, that's the violation of the rule of law. If it is that a corporation has no worth on paper and the HMRC could just decide to wipe out the protections that a corporation offers, its employers, its owners, shareholders from, liability and taxes and stuff like that. That is a terrible precedent. Now, I'm not a big fan of the BBC. I don't really, I'm not a big fan of most state enterprises and stuff like that. But again, this is a violation of the rule of law. If corporations are designed to be set up in this fashion and the HMRC has the ability to completely ignore that and rewrite the rules whenever they want, that is a tremendous problem. That is a huge issue, especially for companies and so forth that, they have to be accountable to their boards, to their shareholders and other things. And if these laws can change willy-nilly and HMRC could just completely ignore certain aspects of it, you're going to get flight. You're going to get these companies leaving because, this is not a stable way of doing business. It's too unpredictable to know whether your company structure will protect you or not. And so that is, again, this is what I'm very concerned about. And it does not seem to be in the public consciousness of the UK that, this is our money. We have a legal obligation to not be robbed. A lot of people I talk to about this are like, well, the rich need to pay more and all this other kinds of stuff, not understanding if we start this slippery slope of, just if the tax man wants your money, he could find any reason to take it. It may start with the rich, but when the rich are all gone because, they're not being protected, and the companies are all gone because their corporations no longer offer them the protections, they're going to come for everybody else. And that brings me to my last article, which I want to look at, and I am just absolutely floored by this entire thing. So let's take a look at that now. Now, I gotta admit, when I read this, I first thought this was like an April Fool's joke. But I only read it today, but this is an article from the 4th of January 2018. And it says here the government to give millions from dormant bank accounts to homelessness scheme. There's another article in the Metro and stuff like that. But here it is, accounts that are considered dormant if they have been open for 15 years with no transactions being carried out and the holder is not contactable. Hundreds of millions of pounds will be seized from these dormant accounts and used to tackle homelessness and help disadvantaged young people, a government minister said. Up to 330 million will be made available from banks and building societies accounts across the country that have remained untouched for at least 15 years, and when the holder cannot be traced by a financial institution. Tracy Crouch, the Minister for Sport and Civil Society, said that the housing initiative aimed at the homeless and vulnerable people, social enterprises and local charities will receive around £135 million across England over the course of the next 5 years. In the latest allotment, a further £90 million will be used to help disadvantaged young people into jobs, and £55 million to go to financial inclusion initiatives such as tackling problems of debt and so forth. And the article basically goes on to explain how all this money is going to be used to benefit the young with employment opportunities and all this other kinds of stuff. But there is a huge principle here that is completely being ignored. Dormant accounts is not the property of the UK government, period. This is not their money, right? This isn't even technically the bank's money, right? This money, whether you can contact the person or not, this money does not belong to the bank or the state. Now, I'm not disputing that there are dormant accounts. Some of them have been sitting probably for hundreds of years, and that money is still just sitting there. But again, it is not the job of the UK government or any government to seize people's private property, right? Now, whether the person, it doesn't say that these people do not have owners, it says they can't be contacted. So in a couple years, we don't know. There are too many unknowns about this sort of thing. Money belongs to somebody. Unless it has been gifted to the federal government or the UK government or whatever state you're dealing with, that is not their money. That is not their money. Now, this is very similar to an EU proposition that came about in light of the financial crisis. I believe at that time it was any amount, any bank account with over 80,000 euros and stuff like that potentially could be seized if a country was found to be insolvent. They could basically raid the bank accounts and take money to bail out the state. And again, this is the rule of law. You need strong property rights in any country to preserve prosperity, economic growth, and opportunity. And again, I'm looking at a lot of these things, and it may not be the tyranny that we're expecting, but this is definitely the beginning of some very disturbing trends. And I, for one, I'm quite disturbed by a lot of this. I'm considering some offshoring options, totally legal. We do live in a globalized world and stuff like that. But the UK government is showing itself to be more and more entrenched on just taking money, disregarding the rule of law. We've seen issues surrounding free speech, even their overstep of the Terrorism Act as it came to Lauren Southern and others. These are very disturbing trends for me, and I'm gonna have to consider some options. But yeah, guys, this is something that I'm concerned about. As you know, I'm big on property rights. You need very strong property rights. We definitely need issues surrounding free speech, and we need the rule of law, which institutions like this absolutely cannot violate the rule of law for the sake of taxes. I think it's a very dangerous precedent. But guys, yeah, thanks for watching. That's my video. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Be sure to connect with me on social media, and if you disagree, that's absolutely fine. You can put your comments below. But as always, thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.